What's up, everybody? It is Kellen here from Starter Systems, and welcome to Track Walk episode number 52 in MX Simulator. And today, I'm going to be doing a real-life track, which is Lommel. However, I am playing the 2012 MX Simulator of Nations version of Lommel, which is actually not necessarily that on par with the actual 2012 Motocross of Nations track, but it was the one that Hagvist, who is a very esteemed track creator in the game, built for the 2012 Motocross Simulator of Nations. And I mean, it was definitely a really good track. It was really good for racing, and specifically the reason why I wanted to do it for Track Walk is since it is the 52nd episode of Track Walk, and 52 being my number, like the number that I like to use. It's the number I run in real life, and definitely my favorite number. I wanted to do something kind of that was more special or near and dear to me. I wouldn't necessarily say that Lommel is my favorite track in the game, but this exact track was where I would say the most special moment in MX Simulator happened for me. I had not been playing the game for a year yet. I'd been playing it for about 10 months. And I was only 2 months out from just getting a brand new computer, which definitely made my speed a lot better. I was able to race the last 4 nationals in 2012 because of my new computer. And the week before this event was set to go off, I went out and purchased an Xbox 360 controller. I had been using a PlayStation 3 controller up until that point to play this game. And the crazy part about that was I was using the D-pad on my PlayStation 3 controller to play this game, which is even more difficult. So I really wasn't that good at MX Sim up until I bought a 360 controller. And it was, I would say, 5 days before the qualifying race that they're going to have for the MX Sim of Nations in 2012. And so the way it worked was Race Factory held a qualifying race for basically the US, Canada, and South America, I think it was, or something like, or no, US, Canada, and Australia, because the time zones were so wild. And then they held a European qualifying race, and you signed up to run for your country. I think this was the fifth, no, sorry, now there's been 5 or 6, but this was the 3rd time that they'd had the MX Simulator of Nations. And the year before that, Brazil had won in 2011, and so USA would be number 4, 5, 6. But anyway, the way the qualifying worked for it all was you signed up for your country, and then you got that qualifier. The qualifier for Europe was ran by EMF, who now actually runs most of the Sim Nation stuff like that, and so on and so forth. But back then RF did it. But EMF ran the European qualifier, which happened on Wednesday, and then the US qualifier happened on Friday. And at the time, this was probably, I mean, I still consider it the biggest event of the year when they have it in Sim, but this was definitely like the event. It definitely attracted pretty much the fastest dudes from around the country, and so I didn't really think I had much of a chance, but I kind of wanted to be a part of it, so I decided to sign up for the MX2 class, which is the 250 class, and give it a go. And the main competition that I would have would be guys like Jared Seidhoff, Daniel Markham, Byron Downen. Because it was the Australian qualifier too, Mike Owen was in the race for Australia. And I knew it was going to be pretty much impossible for me to make it, but I started feeling like I was getting really quick with that new controller that I had. And like I said, I'd only been like 10 months into the game, whereas some of the people I was going up against, like Markham, was I think over 2 years into the game by that point. So I figured, you know, he would have a good shot. Seidhoff had just come off of a year in Sim where he won a couple outdoors in the 250 class. Byron was getting fast, but he was still pretty new to the game like I was. But regardless of which, I definitely was not favored to be the MX2 rider at all going into that qualifying race. But I figured, you know, why not try to get good. And one thing that kind of motivated me about it all, and it's going to sound dumb because I don't usually like to get worked up over video games, but one thing that motivated me about it was a guy named Sam Greenewalt, aka Grizz, decided he was going to make Daniel Markham, a number 5, 250, in which he could run the following day when he essentially was going to qualify to be the MX2 rider. And he made it for Markham, and I was talking to Grizz, and I had been pretty, good friends, if you will, with Grizz before that. I was like, hey, is there any chance that I could get a bike just to run for the qualifying race or something like that since you're already making it? And he was just like, no. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I'm like, what's the deal with that? And he's like, well, you're not going to make it, so it doesn't matter. And I myself didn't believe I was going to make it really either, but I still kind of took it as like, wow, that's kind of a dick move. Like, come on, guy. Like, I just was asking a question. You didn't have to shoot my hopes and dreams down. But anyway, it just kind of motivated me, I guess. And so once the qualifying race came around that Friday night, I was definitely had put some time in on the track and wanted to, at the very least ride well and prove that I'm not some washover guy. And so it was a 20 minute plus 2 lap race, which is not necessarily like a standard time, but it's just what they came up with for the event. And it was one race. It wasn't like whoever got the best overall or whatever. It's just if you won the race, you would be the MX2 rider. And they had an MX1 race and an MX3 race. But since I was in the MX2 race, I really didn't pay much attention to what was going on in those. So we ended up being the second race. And like I said, it was on this track, which would be raced the next day for the actual MX Simulator of Nations. And so the race got underway, and Byron got out to the lead early, and I think I was third, and I want to say that Mike Owen for Australia was in second or something like that, but then he crashed, and so I moved up to second. So I was just kind of riding my own race, not really thinking much about it. And as we got to maybe about 12 minutes into the race, I realized that Byron had gone down with the lead, and suddenly he was maybe like 3 or 4 seconds in front of me. And when I had people in TeamSpeak, or I think then we were still using Ventrilo, but they're telling me the gaps behind me, and they're like, yeah, you've got 15 seconds to Jared, another 10 seconds to Markham or something like that beyond Jared. So I was like, oh, cool, so I can kind of go for it. So I decided, well, I mean, hell, I'm here now. I'm 10 minutes away from possibly being able to win this race. I might as well try to go get him. So then I actually caught Byron, which I couldn't believe. I mean, it wasn't that just out of nowhere he started sucking. He was still running the same pace he had been running earlier, but I just upped it to a level that I didn't think I could run. Caught him, and we were just about at 20 minutes by the time I was right on him, and then I made a mistake and fell down, and I was kind of like, oh, well, there it goes, because, I mean, most of the time, if you try to run Byron or Jared or any of those fast dudes down, they're consistent enough that they won't fall again until the end once they get a chance to get away with it. So I slid out and I lost 5 seconds or something like that, and I'm like, oh, there it goes. And then I started kind of reeling him in again for about a half a lap, and then he went off the track maybe 4 corners before the finish line, which we would have gotten the 2-lap board, or it's not a board or anything, but it was basically we would come to 2 laps to go right there, or it might have actually been the white flag. I think we already had at 2 laps to go, and he went off the track, and I'll show you where when I get to it in a moment. But then I pulled right alongside of him, and man, I wish I had footage of it to show you guys, because Sween, who used to broadcast all the stuff in Sim, lost his bananas when we started battling. I mean, for pretty much that whole lap from that point on, we were nose to tail. He was right on me. I was leading the race, and I was pretty much clenching at that point. I was like, I can't believe I'm even close to this position. And so I was leading, and we got around to the back half of the track, and I made a small mistake and bobbled, but saved it, and like it stood me up, and I kind of went off the main line. And Byron, this is the part where Byron went off the track, and I pulled alongside him, probably right about here, took the lead, and he filed in right behind me, and then we ensued our battle for the last basically lap and a half from there, because we hadn't crossed the line to get the white flag yet, but we were about to. And so, like I said, in the back, I made a small bobble, and he got back by me, but I was still right behind him, and I was kind of just expecting that, okay, well, if I can stick with him through this part of the track, then I will have a chance at the end to go get him, like 2 or 3 corners to go, just put a pass on him that, not necessarily take him out, but, you know, aggressive enough that he has to go wide or something like that, and I get a little bit of a gap so I can try to win this race. And I would say it was maybe 2 jumps later, and he yard sailed, and I slowed like down to almost a complete stop to make sure I didn't hit him, and then make sure I stayed on 2 wheels so I didn't fall and blow it myself right there. And I remember on the broadcast, Sween was going pretty crazy about the whole thing. And it sucked for Byron because, I mean, he rode really good that race, and he probably could have deserved the spot for Team USA just as much as I did. But I was just thrilled to win the race, and was able to keep it up for the last half or so of the lap that I stayed on 2 wheels for. And this is where I was coming through this rut, and I think it was maybe this bump sketched me out, and I stood up and like rode over here, and I kind of, not that sketchy, but ended up over here. He got to the inside of me. We came over this hill, and I was just trying to follow him, and we were going to launch right here, and he crashed like right here, I think, and I kept going and ended up winning the race, and obviously ended up being the MX2 rider, which was that was like the turning point for me in sim as like a competitive game, because up until that point I had just done streaming and like some like editorial stuff for the game, and I really had no ambitions to be fast at it because I was just like, hell, I'm not good. These guys are insane. And that was definitely a turning point for me where I was like, okay, maybe I can be good. And Byron came in and talked to me afterwards, and he said it was probably one of the best races he had. He still tells me to this day it was one of the most fun races he had, and it definitely was. I was having a blast the whole time, and it was awesome after the race to kind of rub it in the dudes' faces that were doubting me, and even Byron, because Byron was still pretty unproven at that point. But anyway, chat after the race was blowing up, and I was just really stoked about the whole thing. And so then, I mean, it was already 8 o'clock that night, and the race was going to start at 7 a.m. the next morning on Saturday. So I decided to, you know, kind of take it upon myself, like, all right, well, I mean, I should get ready for bed and go to sleep so that I can actually wake up for the event. And the dumb thing is that Tyson, at the time, had just come off of a Supercross championship and a Motocross championship, probably was the fastest guy in the game, had won the MX1 qualifier, but was telling us the whole time that he wasn't going to be able to make it. So the guy that finished second and was going to get his spot was a guy named Jack Roberts, who was also pretty fast at the time. He wasn't Tyson or, I mean, really anything super crazy, but he was definitely quick enough to compete. And Jack and I were pretty good friends at that point. We ended up fighting a lot later on, but he ended up getting the MX1 spot, I believe, and then in the MX3 class, whoever won that race, I mean, it might have actually been Tyson that won the MX3 race, and somebody won the MX1 race and didn't show up. But whatever it was, my friend Roy, who is American but he lived in Korea at the time, ended up winning or ended up being the MX3 guy. And so we woke up the next morning, and I was getting myself ready to go, and Roy jumped in TeamSpeak with me, and we were just hanging out and chatting, and it got to like 15 minutes to go, and we're just like, where the hell's Jack? Like, why is Jack not here? And people were trying to get in touch with him on Skype, text him, all this stuff, and he just didn't show up. And it turns out later that he had set his alarm to wake up, and only in MX Simulator and video game competitive, competition video games would this happen. He had set an alarm that went off, and his mother, I guess, came in and turned it off for him, and so he ended up sleeping through his only opportunity to race for the US at the MX Sim of Nations, which, I mean, for him sucked, but for us it just put us in like this super shitty circumstance all of a sudden, because it was so early in the morning on a Saturday that not that many people really were showing up like in the servers yet to do anything. They were going to watch the stream maybe later or something like that, but nobody really like cared enough to join the server. And so there was literally just me and Roy for the Americans about to line up for race 1 without an MX1 guy, because race 1 is MX1, MX2. And fortunately, Stephen Barrington, who everybody now knows as Barrington 314, he builds all the Supercross tracks and stuff like that, just happened to plop in the server at the right time, and he even said later he was like eating a cereal, and they're just like, hey, you're gonna be in race 1 for the Americans because such and such isn't here, and he's like, oh shit. So he ended up running number 1 because he didn't know that America had not won the year before, but I ran number 5. I think I finished 11th in the first race. Barrington finished 20th. And we were just like, man, we were so fucked. I actually would have finished, I think, 6th or 7th or something like that. I was drag racing to the line with a Swedish rider, Linus Manson. And that would have been 2nd in the MX2 class if I had done that. So I felt like I kind of would have done my part then. But Manson cross-jumped me on purpose and took me out. And I know it's on purpose because I later asked Midbeck when he was at my house. Midbeck was also Swedish and raced for Sweden that day. Or I didn't ask him, but he just said, I remember Manson taking you out at Sim of Nations in 2012. And I was like, oh yeah, that really sucked for me. He's like, yeah, but we told him to do it, so he did it on purpose. I was like, oh, thanks. That's really nice of you guys. But anyway, it just kind of screwed me in that race. And then race 2, I think I got an 8th or 9th or something. And then Roy actually had won the 2nd race, so we were actually kind of in contention, but Roy finished 4th in the last moto, and Barrington got I think a 11th or something like that. So his 20 ended up being our drop score, and we finished 4th on the day. So it kind of was a bittersweet feeling because it was definitely like the turning point for me in Sim, where I was just like really stoked to suddenly be considered one of the fast guys in the game. And I thoroughly disappointed everybody in 2013 after that by finishing 9th or 11th or something like that in 250 indoors. So I was pretty much went back to being kind of shit. But like it was just a super exciting moment for me, and probably what I would say is the most like proud moment, if you will, of the game for me on a competitive level. I mean, there's some things that I've done for the game that I attribute to being more successful and that I'm more happy to have been a part of, but racing standpoint wise and track wise, this one definitely holds, I guess, the most sentimental value for me, and that's kind of why I wanted to do it for Track Walk, is that reason, is that it was really kind of this track that is even brought me to this point, because I don't think if I would have been competitive in the game I would have stayed around as long as I did. Because when I started hosting races for Race Factory and I was kind of streaming in between and I was competitive at the same time, like the drive to play the game every day to be fast was what kept me going. Because when I was hosting races in 2013 for RF, particularly the Nationals, everybody was such dicks to me. It was awful. I was treated like shit pretty much, and I would have definitely left had I not, still had the drive to race in the game and enjoy that aspect of it, because I did not enjoy whatsoever hosting. And by the end of 2013, when I was done hosting, I told the RF guys, like, never again. you guys are gonna do it and I'm not, because either I'm not suited to do this and I did a shitty job, or everybody is just terrible and I didn't want anything to do with them. I think the community is kind of smoothed out since then, because we've gotten rid of some of the bad eggs by banning people for life from RF and stuff like that, who were, kind of threatening RF to the point where, like, legal action could have been taken. So the only option was to make sure that they never showed up to our events. I know that sounds like way over the top, but it really did get kind of bad at some points. Like, you wouldn't believe how bad some of the people in this game used to be, and it's amazing to me to think how bad some people think that, like, the conceited kids in this game are, because it was way worse when we had some of these idiots that were, it wasn't even like slight death threats, it was like legit death threats, and fortunately we got those people out of the community before it got any worse than that. So that's my spiel about Lommel and the whole ensuing bit of why I still played this game after it. And I figured for episode 52 it'd be a good kind of time to explain something more about me and this game and the relationship to this game than just a track and show you guys the track. But the track itself is really fun. I really like Lommel as a track in this game. It was really fun to race in 2013 for the World Grand Prix Championship as well. I think I finished 4th or something like that in that Grand Prix. And then in real life, I've always kind of liked sand tracks because I feel like it brings out not necessarily the best riders, but the gnarliest riders, if you will. I mean, obviously Hurlings is considered to be like the sand master, but sometimes you'll learn a lot about how good a rider is well-rounded wise when you watch them race in the sand. Because someone like Cairoli, who decimated the field in 2012 at Lommel in the Motocross of Nations, was someone that, like, I watched him ride with such finesse and style on hard pack tracks that I would have never guessed he was that good in sand. And then watching him, you know, in the years prior to that, and then going into Belgium that year, I was like, man, that guy's insane. So as a track, Lommel and just deep sand tracks like this in general are pretty awesome to me. And it definitely kind of turned me into the sand master a little bit as well. Like, everybody kind of pictured me doing well at Southwick that year after, and when the GP came back to race here in Sim, they thought I'd do well. So definitely like a cool turning point in Sim for me, and just wanted to share a little story with y'all for Track Walk here 52. So if you guys like this video, please go ahead, hit it with a like, and if you have any comments, feel free to comment. We will answer back to any comments we feel fit. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So thanks y'all for joining us for Track Walk episode number 52 here on Start Your Systems. We'll see y'all later.